Tell us how you went from being a professional poker player for almost 10 years to now being the perception coach, working to help transform people's mindset in the self-improvement space.
So, yeah, it's been quite a journey across, but ultimately, a lot of the things that I've done in the past ended up leading me to where I am now in the present. And it was poker that was a real challenge for me, both mentally and emotionally, because the thing that I needed to face every single day as a poker player was massive amounts of uncertainty. So there's no way of knowing how the cards are going to be dealt and who your opponents are going to be and how they're going to play. And then you have to find ways to be able to deal with that. So you have your strategies that you play as a poker player, but then there's also how do you show up and apply those strategies? And that's where some of the thoughts and beliefs and emotions can get in the way of showing up and enjoying it. And I really kind of discovered this myself when I was playing and I was getting stuck and I kept kind of getting lost in feeling unlucky and feeling like things weren't really working out for me. And I would complain about this quite a lot to anyone that was willing to listen. And one of my friends at the time, who was a mentor, I was kind of sharing with him, look, I lost this hand and I had a pair of aces and I lost a pair of kings. And he said, look, do you ever think I lose hands like that as well? And I said, yeah, but not as much as me. He said, no, I do. I just don't talk about it as much. And I kind of thought about that for a little bit. And then he said, when you do focus on the hands that you've lost and how unlucky you are, how do you feel? I said, oh, I don't feel great. And I feel like, it knocks my confidence. And he said, look, I'm just not going to listen anytime you share any bad beat stories anymore. And so for the next week, I didn't talk about the hands that I lost and the things that didn't work out. What I found was it started to balance my perceptions. And I started to focus more on the things that were working in the hands that I did win. And the small amounts that I saw that started to expand and I started to feel better about myself. And I realized, like, by changing my focus and what I was looking at, I could change how I felt and my levels of confidence as well. That opened my eyes. And then through many different kind of modes of doing meditation and mindfulness and studying psychology and personal development, I then became really fascinated in how mindset affects our performance and the way that we perceive ourselves in situations changes everything. And eventually, over time, I got really interested in helping other people with some of the challenges that I'd overcome, and then moved across from playing poker into coaching.
I love that story for two reasons. The first being, I always think it's very inspiring to hear how you went down this one career path, playing professional poker, to now doing something that someone might consider totally unrelated and totally different. And I think that's very inspiring for anyone listening, that you can make a change and you can pivot and stay open to what continues to intrigue and excite you and inspire you. Also, this element that your mindset really transforms how you see your entire life and also impacts what you attract into your life, which is exactly what we're going to dive into in today's episode in detail. But even this morning, I have like a specific example that I experienced. I get these migraines sometimes, and I was on my way to volunteer like I do on Wednesday mornings for the last time in New York City, and I started to get this horrible migraine. And instead of letting it impact my entire day and spiral and say, oh, no, I can't volunteer, I have this great guest episode today, it's going to just ruin my entire day, I took some Advil, closed my eyes for 30 minutes, and did not let it impact how I went into the rest of my day. Now it's honestly gone. Whereas normally it really lingers throughout the entire day. And I know this might seem unrelated, but I wanted to share that because the past version of myself would really dwell and let that migraine negatively impact my whole day, because I would fall down that spiral of, oh my gosh, like this is horrible. Like this is so frustrating that this is happening to me. And it like made the headache worse. Whereas when I chose to just like stay open and let go of what was out of my control and do the best I could to take care of myself, I really stopped thinking about it and it started to go away. So share a little bit more about this idea that we are not our thoughts and our feelings, but we're the one who can choose and change them.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing the story. And it's definitely really related to what I was talking about with poker as well. So there's the situations that happen and then we experience them in a certain way and we react to them. And that can be a migraine, or you have a headache and you experience some pain. And what happens is we experience that in the present, and then we continue to experience it because we bring the present into the future. But really, pain is something that's actually experienced in the past, and then we keep it alive in the present. So when I was playing poker, I realized that it wasn't so much the cards that I was dealt, it was how I played the cards. And so, you were dealt a migraine, and then you decided how you're going to play it. And one week we can experience that is to feel sorry for ourselves or wallow in it, or even keep it going and wish it wasn't there and resist it. Or we can actually say, well, if this is happening, what do I want to do about it? What do I want to do with it? And the way that we kind of have that freedom to be able to do that is to realize that we are not our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, but we are in fact the one that is observing them. So if I'm attached to a particular thought or a particular feeling, what happens is I'm holding on to it, and then there's not really a lot I can do about it. And so what I am holding on to, or what I'm resisting, if I don't want it, then it persists. But when you notice that you're not actually the thought itself, but you're the one observing the thought, you've got a choice about what you can do with it. So the metaphor that I use for this is that, if your thoughts and feelings are like the character in a show or the actor in a show, ultimately you're the director, which is observing them and noticing what's going on and kind of guiding them. You don't have total control over them, but you can guide them and tell them what you want to do. But when we forget that, we just get so immersed in being the actor or being the thought, the feeling, that we forget that there's something that we can do about it. We just get run by it instead. And that's when we feel like out of control, or like we're kind of a victim to life circumstances or even our own thoughts, because we feel like there's nothing we can do about them. But when you step out and you see that you're the director or you're the observer of them, it gives you a greater perspective to have a bit more choice and a bit more freedom to say, what am I going to do with that?
So for someone listening who might feel like that's impossible, how can they actually start to do this? Like, do they incorporate meditation, or how do they really step away from that victim mindset when that might be all they know? What's been effective for you or your clients?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think meditation is a really beautiful tool because it's the process of sitting down and observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. So the thing that kind of ties us to our thoughts and feelings is our judgments. So you might be thinking, I'm really anxious right now, or I should be doing better, or I shouldn't make a mistake. And then you judge yourself for that, and then it keeps it alive. If you just notice it without the judgment, you say, look, I made a mistake, or I'm having some anxious thinking, all of a sudden you're not attached to it, you're not tied into it. So a really helpful technique that can really help people in separating themselves from their thoughts is the real simple change of language from I am anxious, or I am overwhelmed, or not confident, to I am feeling anxiety, or I am having some feelings of overwhelm, or I'm thinking that I'm not confident. This just subtle shift from going from I am to I think or I feel takes you away from identifying with it, where you are it and there's nothing you can do about it, to actually it being a fleeting experience, like a moment by moment experience that can change. Because one moment you can be experiencing anxiety, and then in the next moment you can be experiencing joy. The same way one moment you might feel confident or be thinking confident thoughts, and the next moment you might be not. So this also helps you see that you're not fixed and permanent. And that also then gives you the awareness that you can grow and you can become the person that you want to become if you're willing to decide that and go out and play the part of that person.
You said this one thing in there that I really loved, this idea of not judging ourselves, because I think that's really the thing that keeps a lot of us trapped, and that causes a lot of us to fall down those spirals, is because we habitually are so self-critical. Like, again, this morning, I normally, honestly, would be really hard on myself and judge myself and be like, oh, of course this is happening today. Like, oh, this is so horrible that I can't volunteer for this last time. And I just had this really negative narrative that I would normally be victim to and get caught up in. And it made the situation feel so much worse. But instead, I chose this path of self-compassion because I realized, okay, this situation's out of my control in this moment. So what is judging myself really going to do here? All we can do is take steps towards mitigating any situation that comes up in life and any circumstance, because a lot of life is going to be out of our control. But again, like you said, we can control what we choose to do about it and the thoughts that we choose to attach to it. So share a little bit about this idea of unconditional self-acceptance. What does that mean to you, and how is that effective in your mindset work?
Yeah, honestly, for me, it's been one of the most life-changing understandings and practices, because I was notoriously bad for judging myself. Like when I was playing poker, if I made mistakes, I would think about them for days on end and beat myself up and, say like, why did I do that? Or I should have done it better. And you can typically hear the sound of judgment in the word should. I should or I shouldn't. And it ultimately creates like this cage or a prison that we're locked in. And that's what judgments are designed to do. They're just designed to control. So we judge other people. It's our way of trying to control them and project our values onto them. And then we judge ourselves and we say, well, I should do this or I shouldn't do that. And it creates this box that we live in, right? All these shoulds are like rules, unconscious rules that we have that say you're allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that. Even judging, right? So one of the things, if we're practicing non-judgment, it's like, well, I shouldn't judge myself. Well, good luck with that, because we all judge everybody all the time. It just happens, right? And the goal is just noticing when we do it and not judging ourselves for it and not judging other people. But the way this shows up in terms of acceptance, or how it gets in the way of our own acceptance, is typically we have a conditional acceptance. So we only accept ourselves when we meet certain conditions or certain criteria. So for many of us, that might be, well, if I'm perfect and if people like me and if I do well, that means that I'm good enough, or that means that I'm okay. And it sets us up to not feel okay about ourselves a lot of the time. And these are often unconscious rules and expectations that we have in the form of shoulds and musts and ought tos. They become these unconscious rules that dictate our life, and they create the box that we're currently in. And when you get a step out of that, it can feel uncomfortable and it can feel like scary. And the whole goal is to actually accept yourself unconditionally, so without conditions. And this means letting go of the rules. That there are no rules, there are no conditions required for you to love and accept yourself. And this can be a really difficult one for people to grasp if they have, had these rules placed on them throughout their lives, because they're like, well, surely if you're mean to somebody or if you're not kind to somebody, then that means you're not good enough, or that means you're a bad person. But it only means that if you say it means that. And the thing is with human beings is we make mistakes and we're fallible people. And we're not perfect. And having free will, many of us think, well, because we've got free will and we can choose, therefore we should get it right. Ultimately, just because you've got free will, it doesn't mean you're going to get everything right. We all are imperfect and make mistakes. So if we instead accept ourselves unconditionally, it means when you are performing well or you're not performing well, you can still like yourself and appreciate yourself. So it doesn't mean that you're going to just let yourself off the hook and do whatever you want to do. It just means that you're not going around worrying about it all the time. So, the way I'd explain this is my daughter, who is 5 years old, and I said, well, I'm only going to love her when she respects me, when she follows the rules, when she behaves, when she does what I want her to do. Then anytime she doesn't do that and then I don't love her, that's going to be a really scary existence for her, because she's always going to be on edge. But if I say, look, I will love you no matter what you do, and there are ways that I would like you to be, but it's up to you if you're going to be those ways or not. She can be free to make mistakes, but know that she's still going to be looked after, she's still going to be appreciated and still be cared for. When we've got all these rules and conditions that get in the way, it just stops us from having the freedom to actually go out and try and make mistakes and fail. And experiment, because this is what really opens up when you do accept yourself unconditionally. You've got your intentions. If your intentions are good, you go out and you try different things, but you've got this freedom. It's like a safety net that if you go and make a mistake, or even if you mess up, or even if people don't like you, or even if they judge you, or even if you judge yourself, you can still accept yourself. And that ultimately gives you a great deal of freedom to not have to go around being so worried all the time.
I think that's a really beautiful take. I personally feel as like a bit of a high achiever, and I know a lot of other high achievers might have this mindset that keeps them stuck sometimes, that, okay, but if I fully accept myself, then I'm not going to feel motivated to accomplish all these things or to keep, taking steps forward. So I think there's that side of self-acceptance where it is important to accept that we're imperfect and that we make mistakes and have that self-compassion for ourselves. But how can we find that balance of like, okay, yes, I have that self-worth and self-compassion and self-love, self-acceptance, like you said, but still feel that drive and motivation to change in the way that we want to change and take steps towards the things that we want to take steps towards?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it really comes down to what we want to be motivated by. Do we want to be motivated by fear? So, if I break the rules and if I mess up, then I'm going to be judged and shamed, and I don't want to experience that. So I'm going to be driven by fear, which this is ultimately what drives perfectionism in people. I have to get it right. I have to do it perfectly. And people pleasing, which is I have to be liked by others and I must not be disliked by other people. So they're fear-based motivations, and they motivate people to get to the very tops of their professions, but then they get there and you experience like the reward or the trophy, and then you just get relief because you're like, at least I made it, at least I was perfect. And then you go back to being fearful all the time. So you spend your whole life being afraid, and it's driven by this belief of not being good enough, which really shows up in many different guises, even imposter syndrome. It's kind of like walking around and you're in like the away fans and you've got a home shirt on underneath your actual shirt, and you go around trying not to show it off to people and just being afraid you're going to get found out. That's what it feels like. So you try and be perfect, or you try and make everybody like you. And it's a fear-based strategy because you have to be a certain way. Whereas the other way you can motivate yourself is by love and by connection and by like doing things that are important to you that you value. So when you're motivated from that place, that you're not trying to move away from something, which is fear, you're actually moving towards something that you like and that you enjoy. And that's really the difference. So sometimes you can use fear as a motivational tool. It's not the worst thing in the world, but if it's unconsciously driving everything, you're going to be living from survival, and you're going to get to the outcome and kind of wonder why you got there. And it's like the whole journey is painful to get to this outcome that's a relief, versus when you're doing things that you love because you want to do them and you're choosing to move towards it and you're not worried all the time and anxious. You can actually enjoy it, and then like don't beat yourself up for the mistakes and everything else. So it's ultimately knowing that you change the motivation from trying to move away from fear to trying to enjoy what you're doing and do what you love. And it's just a much more fun and free way to be.
Yeah, 100%. You can feel it when you're living in fear versus when you're living out of love and living out of inspiration. But I think unfortunately, most of us are stuck in that place where we're seeking validation and people pleasing and trying to fit in, right? I think it is really important to acknowledge that that is what living out of fear is. It's fear of not being good enough and fear of rejection. So for that person that feels like they're constantly seeking that reassurance and seeking that validation, how can they break away from that and give it to themselves instead?
Yeah, so one of the traps that keeps us in that place of seeking validation is it gives like this temporary sense of relief. It's the same as like procrastination. You get stuck in a cycle. So we procrastinate. The reason we actually do procrastinate and put things off isn't because we're lazy. It's actually because of stress. We don't want to experience the stress. And the same can be true for like seeking validation or reassurance. We seek it because we think it gives us some sort of sense of relief or safety. So, hey, look, I'm going to make this decision. Do you think it's okay? And someone says, yeah, it's okay. And you feel, oh, right, I feel relief. And then you go and you make the decision and you feel like they've got a bit of shared responsibility in it. When the reality is, it then makes you more afraid for the future. And then that builds up as well, right? And there's a number of costs that when we really get present to see what seeking validation and reassurance costs us, then it starts to like not make as much sense. So I shared like how this really showed up for me, because this was massive. Like I used to struggle with this every single day, and I didn't really know how bad it got until there was one day where I went for like a routine contact lens or glasses checkup, and they were checking my lenses and they said, right, you get to choose a new pair of glasses. And I walked out in the glasses store and I looked across the store, and there's rows and rows upon rows of glasses everywhere. And I needed to choose a new pair. And I could just feel the anxiety in me as I looked out. And I was just thinking in my head, like, I've got to pick a really great pair. They've got to look good. People are going to need to like them. Which pair am I going to pick? And I just, it's almost like I couldn't think for myself. And as I was trying to look for them all. And I was on my phone Googling what are the celebrities wearing. I was looking up David Beckham and like Gosling and like what are these celebrities wearing? What are cool? And I asked the person who was working in the shop if they could help me choose a pair. And they gave me the nod and a pair in the end. And I sat down and I was handing my money over to pay for them, still wondering if they were right or not. But I paid and I left the store. And I thought that was it, right? But that was just like the start of it. I got to the tube station at Tottenham Court Road and I went to go down the escalator. And as I went down, I was thinking in my head, look, you're near the store. You could just take these glasses back. So why don't we just go back? So when I got to the bottom, I went back up the escalator. And as I was going up, I was like, this is ridiculous. It's just a pair of glasses. Just buy them and then go home. So I went back down the escalator and the same thing happened 4 or 5 times until I got to the bottom of the escalator. And I said, what the hell am I doing? Right? It's just a pair of glasses, buy them and go home. So I made that decision. I gave myself a stern talking to. I went home. A couple of years later, I was going to the airport to go to Vegas to play in the World Series of Poker. And as I got to the airport, I saw a sunglasses shop. And I thought, right, I need a pair of sunglasses because I don't have any. And I had this initial feeling of like, oh, not again. But things were different at this point, right? And I walked in the shop. I saw a pair of Ray-Bans that I liked, picked them up, tried them on, bought them, walked out, didn't think anything of it. Same situation, but very, very different experience. The first time I was just constantly seeking reassurance from both mentally inside my head and with other people outside of me. The second time, instead of saying, will people like it? Are they going to be perfect? Are they the right pair? I just asked myself one simple question. What do I like? Which pair do I like, right? But we get so trained out of listening to ourselves that we look for this external validation. We think it's keeping us safe, but it's the thing that's keeping us anxious. So the real thing that I'd love to share with anyone who feels like they doubt themselves or their decisions or they look for that reassurance is just to be aware that although it appears on the surface like it's providing safety, it creates less safety. And if you're just willing to start asking yourself, what do I like and what do I want? What do I love? And then follow that. What you do is you build this like trust with your intuition, and then your decisions start to get easier and you trust yourself more and you doubt yourself less.
You know, that was such a simple story, but such a perfect example to describe this. And I have a couple thoughts I really want to dive into. This idea of self-trust. The more that you seek reassurance and validation from other people, instead of trusting your own judgment, you're diminishing your own self-trust, because essentially what we're saying when we do that is, I trust that person's opinion over my own, and I value what they like over what I like deep down. And it's training ourselves, as you mentioned, to seek that reassurance and that validation instead of building our self-trust. And it's crazy too, like the amount of headspace and energy and stress that you let yourself go through that first time around, from turning around, going up and down the escalator, like feeling uncertain, just getting so in your head because you knew deep down, like you probably knew the glasses that you wanted to get, but you were conflicted because the ones that the person at the store liked or the ones that the celebrities were wearing weren't those ones that you liked. And you're like, ooh, do I want to be liked by other people and wear these glasses maybe I don't love? Or do I go with the ones I really love and just trust myself and trust that intuition? And then you fast forward to the story you shared that like you did it so quickly. It was so seamless and you didn't waste half your day like stressing about, oh, are people going to like this, and falling down this trap. And I think so many people are living constantly chasing this validation. And like you said before, this is just living in fear. And it's a really just unenjoyable and unsatisfying and unfulfilling way to live. And similar to you, I feel like I was living like this for so long too, but every time I choose to not fall into that desire to seek that validation and reassurance like I used to, and instead say like, no, actually, like I know it's going to be best for me in this moment and I don't need anyone's opinion or permission to do so, I start to build that self-trust and unlearn that desire deep down to seek that validation.
Yeah, because if you don't do it, you don't give yourself the opportunity to kind of build that muscle. If you think of like trust as a muscle that you build, if you're always looking outside of yourself or to other people for those answers, you don't get to flex and strengthen the muscle yourself. It's like being in the gym and getting the trainer to lift the weights for you. It might be easy in the moment, but you don't get to build that muscle. Whereas uncomfortable in the beginning, you keep building the muscle and it gets stronger and then it gets easier. And then what you do is you go for bigger weights. So that's what it looks like in this world. You might get really good at trusting yourself and you're like, right, and I can get the glasses, or I can make decisions on what to eat and where to go and what to do. And then it goes to, what career move should I go in? And then you trust yourself and build that trust in that area. And then it starts to expand. So for anyone listening, it's useful to like reflect on where in your life do you seek validation or reassurance? Because each of us has a different, it might be in your relationship, you seek it the most and you want to know your partner's okay. And that can provide a great deal of insight. It might be in your career. For some people, like for me, it was in every area. So that's where it was really pervasive. And then I started to knock it down bit by bit in different areas. And then as you knock it down, you experience more freedom and more connection with yourself as well.
I think, like you mentioned too, it's helpful to remember that it reveals where you might need to feel more confident. Like if you constantly are seeking validation romantically or validation in your career path, it's probably because you're lacking that inner confidence and inner self-trust in that area in your life. So to me, it's like a signal like, why am I always chasing that validation and reassurance? Maybe that's some inner work that I need to do. And it leads me to this beautiful point that you share in your content, that you can be both afraid and confident at the same time. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's if we look at courage, right? There's no courage without fear. So if you're going to go and do something and you're not afraid, you've either done it before or it's something, or it's something that you're used to. And when you're afraid, that's when it's the most difficult to take the step. But that's where confidence is built. Because if you want to build confidence in something, you typically haven't got confidence in it if you've never done it before. So it's backwards, and you got to see this as backwards. So typically a lot of us see when something's scary, we think, right, I'm going to run away from that. But ultimately fear points us in the direction of the things that are really important to us. And if we're afraid of it and we've always been afraid and we're not doing it, that's where we can grow. So if you're willing to move in that direction, that's where courage is like the stepping stone where you can go across, because you're afraid, but by taking the step at the same time while you're afraid, you can be confident. And I say this to my daughter all the time when, she's climbing in the park or she's wanting to do things. She's like, Daddy, I'm afraid. And I'm like, you can be afraid and confident at the same time. And then she takes that step and she sees herself doing it and she moves forward. There's an influencer I see online called Sophie. I think her name's Sophie Jones. And she does like rejection challenges. And yesterday I saw her do a video where she was knocking on the window of the next door car to ask somebody if they want to have a race with her, right? And she's really nervous about asking. You can see like the realness in how nervous she is asking this person to have a race. And she knocks on the window and says, hey, look, do you want to have a race with me? And the person says no. And she's like, okay. And then a couple minutes later, she goes and asks somebody else. And although she's still scared, you could see how much easier it was the second time round because she'd just done it. And anytime you do something like this, you notice that when you've done it, you start to feel more confident because the confidence comes afterwards. And if you keep doing it, that's how you can be afraid and confident at the same time. Because the most confident people are feeling fear a lot. They just make themselves feel safe in their own mind and body by not making the fear be something bad or something to run from, but something that you can hold. And this is what links with a theory that I discovered proves how this is all true. It's called self-perception theory that was uncovered by a psychologist called Daryl Bem. And it says that we make decisions about ourselves when we're uncertain by what we see ourselves do. So this is like you observing yourself, taking the actions and doing the things you want to do. Your brain forms an opinion of you based on what it sees you doing. So if you're afraid, but then you go and you say no to somebody, or you have that difficult conversation, or you take the step, or launch your first podcast episode when you're afraid, but you do it. The brain sees you taking the step, even though you're afraid. And then it forms a self-perception that I must be somebody who does that. And that's where it gets easier. So ultimately, like seeing like you can be afraid and confident at the same time. This is what courage is. And this is why it's the key to your freedom, essentially.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, 100%. I love this idea of reframing fear to not be a bad thing. Because the more we view that fear as a bad thing, the more we're going to want to run from it. But I wholeheartedly believe it's that fear that we need to lean into, because on the other side of that is that thing that we really want. To your point, it's that confidence that we need to build. And so pushing through that fear, we're slowly building that confidence, because I genuinely think taking action in the direction of that thing that might seem the most scary is the best way to build confidence. The last thing I want to talk about with you is an idea that I feel like most people probably haven't heard of that I would love for you to share. This idea of the turning point. in one's growth journey. So all of these things and shifts that we've discussed might lead to someone's quote turning point. What is this turning point, and how can someone might detect if they're there on their journey?
Great. Okay, I'm excited to talk about the turning point because it's a really exciting moment in each of our lives when we experience it. It's even more exciting because the first time you experience it, it just feels great, but you also can create this for yourself to make change happen. So typically, like a turning point is where you're at a stage in your personal growth or healing journey where you've come over the hump. So there's 3 stages to our journey of growth in any area. The first one is like despair, where we've got a problem or a challenge and we just can't see a way out. And it's not fun to be in that place, and it's difficult. When you move to the beautiful place of hope, where you can see like there's a way out. Maybe somebody gives you a strategy that you've never seen before, or you see somebody do the thing that you want to do and you think maybe it's possible for me. And you start to have a direction to move in, and that's exciting. And then the last stage that you get to is knowing. It's like the certainty that, do you know what, I can have that business, or I can set up the podcast, or I can have the relationship I want. You just have this feeling in you like it's happening, it's going to happen. So you go from despair to hope to knowing. And the turning point is when you really feel that internal motivation. Instead of running away from the things that you didn't want to do, you start moving towards them instead. So there are many different signs that you're experiencing the turning point. But the number one sign is, or the most clear indicator, is that thing that you were running from or really afraid of or putting off, you actively make the decision to move towards it. So let's say you're really afraid of public speaking, or doing your own podcast, or setting up a business, and you've been putting it off and the idea is just impossible. You actually then not only can see it happening, but you actively move towards it yourself. No one else is pushing you and you feel the pull towards it. So, some other indicators of this are you're doing more than you have to. So for example, if you're going to the gym, rather than just going in and coming out, you stay in there a little bit longer. You go for a run a little bit further than you would do. It's a sign that you're growing, the turning point. So you're moving out of the old and into the new, but you're actually stretching yourself further than you want to go. And the reason why it's called the turning point, or I call it the turning point, is because gone past where you were into the future and into the new. Now you're expanding, and the possibilities are just like you've turned from going one way and being one person into going in a new way and being a new person as well. And it's just super exciting. So the reason I also get excited about talking about this is that this can happen as you go through the journey and go through a growth journey or healing journey. But why not create the turning point yourself? Because if you were to start doing more than you had to, or you took the thing that you're afraid of and you actively move towards it, you can create that already. So rather than waiting for it to happen, you can actually make it happen. You can take yourself from despair into hope very, very quickly. And as you take the steps, there will be a belief, there will be a knowing in you that it's possible. Because again, you're going to see that evidence of you doing it, and you'll start changing your self-perceptions and being the person you want to be.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think it's important to highlight too that it can even be small moments. Like I think of your glasses story, like that was a transformation in your life. You went from being this one person who handled the situation pretty poorly and got all stressed about it to handling it so much better and not letting yourself fall down that spiral. And I think it's helpful to allow ourselves to come back to that self-compassion and to let ourselves feel proud of the growth that we're making and acknowledge that growth that we're making. Like again, even this morning, like I used to handle these migraines so much worse, and I feel proud of how I handled it, even though it was such a small thing. To me, that was like a bit of a turning point. And as you mentioned, there's much bigger and more transformative turning points on our journey. But I think it's such a beautiful way to remind ourselves to be proud of the growth that we're making and acknowledge it and allow us to stay motivated. Like, oh yeah, like this work that I'm putting in is really helping me grow and is really coming across in this beautiful way in my life and having an impact.
Yeah, I mean, respect for you for turning round the migraine, because migraines are really tough and they're really awful. So I feel that, but being able to like make that change actively and consciously yourself and then be feeling good is remarkable. And that's what's really available for people when they see the power of like when you make a decision and then you follow it with action and put energy into it, you really can start to move things around and turn things around. And it's really exciting and powerful.